So according to my app, I reached 3,000 subscribers, which means that I gotta upload that Big Bang Theory video that I promised, which I will, but before I do that, I might as well wait until my sub count is done fluctuating because it does happen a lot, and I don't want to upload the video when I'm still below 3K. In the meantime, I decided to bring back a small little subject that I brought up in my Mandy analysis. Now this video is pretty old, and to be honest, while I am sort of proud of it, I don't really like it that much anymore. The production quality is pretty bad, and I wish I had written it better overall. Although this pretty much applies to all of my pre-2018 videos, not just this one. However, I do like the ideas I propose in it, and one of them was that Mandy's parents could have been responsible for her lack of discipline because they were extremely neglectful. I ended up receiving a comment that proposed the idea that the reason why her parents were neglectful was probably because they were scared of her, which I do believe is partially true. We have seen enough evidence that they do seem to be afraid of her, and for good reason. She has absurd levels of plot armor and is one of the most cold-hearted and terrifying characters in that series, even higher than actual underworld beings. Nevertheless, I find it a little bit hard to buy into this notion that they couldn't have done anything to enforce authority over her. I mean, maybe now you could say it's a lost cause, but I still definitely think they are largely responsible for not educating her. Now, the first thing I feel like I really need to address is probably what many would consider the biggest example for why she's too much for her parents to handle, and that is the episode Scary Poppins, where it's pretty evident that Mandy treats her parents as if they were her bitches, and even by the end of the episode, when they gain enough confidence to confront her, she did some weird demonic hypnosis shit that put them under her control again, which clearly shows that she's too much for them. The problem with using this episode though is that it's not very consistent with what happens in the entire series. I mean, in Keeper of the Reaper they do kind of show this behavior, but when you look at their other appearances, they're not nearly as terrified of her as they are here, and in no way does Mandy impose this much dominance to them. Here in this episode, she talks to her mother pretty normally, with neither of them seeming to break any mother-daughter manners.
Please. Mom, Grim and I will take it from here.
Okay, honey. Have your little friend put away my mop when he's done playing.
In Mandy Bites Dog, when Cerberus pissed on one of the trees in whatever park they were, Mandy suggested that he should avoid doing that in their house, specifically because her mom would get upset. And even if you want to say this material is too early, in season 5, Mandy gave her dad a gift for Father's Day. She didn't have to do it, and her dad didn't seem to show any signs of being scared or intimidated by her. But what's probably the biggest evidence that proves what I'm trying to say is the very premise of the series. The way the dynamic works between the main characters is Mandy somehow makes Grim do pretty much all of her chores. If she really has full control of her parents, then she could just make them do them. Maybe you could argue that they get busy with work, but a lot of the times when Grim does her chores, it's during the weekend because she's seen digging around somewhere else. And even if you were to argue that they either work during the weekends or that those episodes happen to take place during the holidays, we know that couldn't have been the case in Scary Poppins because Mandy explicitly said that she was going to school at the exact time she was ordering her parents to do her chores. The fact that this doesn't happen more often can only indicate that this social environment isn't reflective of how they generally act around each other. Furthermore, in this episode, Mandy says my chores are piling up. My kind of implies that she was ordered to do them, maybe from her mom, who knows. Now, I'm not gonna say that they aren't at least a little bit scared of her, and I don't necessarily believe that Mandy treats her parents with the same amount of respect that kids typically do. I'm sure she steps a line at least a little bit. I just don't believe their relationship is as absurdly reverse authoritative as it was depicted in Scary Poppins. I like to think of this as a thought experiment, to take this idea and make it into an episode just to see how much they can derive entertainment from it. Plus, continuity in Billy and Mandy is all over the place, so usually what you do in cases like these is you go with what's the most consistent representation of the characters. Something else I wanted to talk about is regarding Mandy's growth because, okay, even if you wanted to argue that her parents are scared of her, you kind of have to wonder, have they always felt this way? Were they always afraid of her ever since she was a baby? I find it a little bit hard to believe that Mandy was just as overpowered and demonic as she is today when she was a fucking toddler. Chances are her personality developed as she grew up. And I believe that their neglectfulness caused her to lack politeness and harbor a lot of bitterness, especially when it's pretty clear Mandy's dad wanted a son over a daughter, which could have even been the reason for why Mandy turned out to be a tomboy. Now, Mandy's tomboyness isn't super blatant, especially when you only look at her appearance, but over the course of the series she has shown to have interest in activities more commonly engaged by boys. And despite some instances here and there, Mandy does not come off as a particularly feminine person. Now, to be fair, this element of her character isn't as concrete as I'd like it to be. It's debatable if Mandy even cares all that much about having her dad's approval, consciously or subconsciously. However, I do believe this is something at least worth considering. So yeah, I still stand by my statement that Claire and Philip are pretty much entirely to blame for how she turned out. If they didn't slack off in raising her and failed to give love and attention to her, Mandy would have likely turned out to be a completely different person. But hey, that's just me.